Ambassador Middendorf, thanks again for taking time out of your schedule to be with us on Common Sense TV today. Let's talk a little bit about Russia. Last time we spoke, about a year ago, you mentioned that the incoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marine General, said, when asked during his confirmation hearings, what was the biggest threat, said Russia.
Yeah.
And that surprised a lot of members of Congress at the time because they hadn't been thinking in those terms. They were thinking ISIS, they were thinking Iran, Iraq. Do you agree that Russia is the biggest immediate threat?
Russia and China. Russia's developed a new missile called the S-500 missile, and they're supplying the S-400 to Iran right now. It's the greatest, most successful any missile defense in the world right now. And they've also, Russia and China are working on missiles that will go 13,000 miles an hour, hypersonic. And the best we have right now, the Aegis, the anti-missile defense we have now is about 4,000 miles an hour. We can hit a missile coming in at 4,000, but they're moving very fast. They're in stage 3 almost, so their missile development, we're still in stage 1. And
so that goes back to what we were saying in the last segment about thinking ahead, not just on development, but on the threats, so that the development meets
them. Of
those.
course, a nuclear warhead today from Russia or China would be 1,300 times that of Nagasaki. It would not just take out New York, but probably all of New York State and New England, what have you. So this is a much more threatening world than it was after World War I or even in the Cold War when I was active. So we obviously have to move fast to rebuild our military, our long lead time programs. We have very able ships, we have very able planes and what have you. But that's not the point. You can't be stagnant. You have to build for the future, and we know that they're building rapidly for the future. China has a lot of money. They're a wealthy nation now, and they can afford to build very advanced weapon systems, and they're doing so.
Okay. Now, when we talk about Russia, one of the things that most people will remember is that we've seen recent military action by the Russians in the Crimea. And they're massed today on the border of the remainder of the Ukraine, and there's a real question as to what happens next there. Do you?
I think we have to look beyond that. When Russia was able to acquire, like the Germans acquired Sudetenland in 1938, I remember it very well. When the Russians were able to acquire the Crimea without any downside for them, a little bit of a sanction that doesn't mean anything. It means something, but it's not significant. They got away with murder, so to speak. And now they're threatening the eastern Ukraine to have land access to Crimea. China, so emboldened, saw that we were a paper tiger, pretty much, and went ahead and developed the Spratly Islands way beyond their territorial rights. And even the UN, which is usually not very judicial in my books, wrapped their knuckles the other day and said that they've violated the rights of the Philippines, Malaysia, and and Vietnam, other countries that had territorial rights in the same area. So China's on the move, Russia's on the move. The real threat, I think, if we let our guard down in the next several years, is that Russia will try to reinvent its empire and take the Baltics, especially Estonia and Latvia and what have you. And they've been making noises to that effect anyway. They've massed forces in that area on training programs. Of course, Europe is very much aware of this risk, and some of the Baltic countries are actually raising their weapons programs, raising their military expenditures. But what is tragic is that Europe has let its guard down and dropped down to, on average, about 1% for spending on defense and NATO, and we're spending 4 and a fraction percent. We're actually spending about 70% or more of the total NATO budget, which is unconscionable. There should be more of a burden sharing there, particularly since they're the countries that are immediately threatened.
You can understand that the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, are very, very concerned and are arming up as much as they can in fairly small territories. But if America's a paper tiger, is Europe a paper mache tiger? I mean, they have let their guard down even farther than we have. I have a question for you on the Russian incursion in Ukraine, and then to any further incursions they may be considering. Is that a means on the part of the Russian government to cover some of the shortcomings they have economically? Are they using the military drums to cover the fact that things at home are bad?
I mean, that's what Galtieri did in the Falkland War.
Mm-hmm.
He invaded the Falklands in order to cover up his economic malaise, which had been caused by him. Socialism always causes an economic malaise. And so in the end, and so usually external adventures are taken on by countries like that. But in this case, I think the real prize is the Baltics. Putin is very anxious to rebuild the Soviet empire that he had, that was lost under Yeltsin.
Doing that for the diplomatic importance of reasserting national power? Is that what is it there for? I mean, I can understand the Spratly Islands, the Chinese, they may be looking for oil. There are resources down there that they might need, but what do you have in the Baltics?
I mean, the Spratly Islands is not just oil, it's to restrict access. Mm-hmm. For example, if it makes it a strategic strait, like the Malaccan Straits, mm-hmm. or the Straits of Hormuz, once the Chinese have control of the South China Sea.
But then what's the analog to the Baltics?
50% of all the world's commerce goes through those straits, and 90% of all the energy to Asia goes through those straits.
Yeah, so militarily it's very important. But then what does Putin get with the Baltics?
Access to the sea.
Access to the Baltic Sea. Okay.
See, the new wars are going to be fought from under the sea and from space. With the DF-21 missile the Chinese have developed, although we're not sure that they've fully developed it, surface warfare combatants are going to be at risk, serious risk. So the emphasis now for the modern nations is to build under the sea submarines and sea-launched cruise missiles from them, from space platforms, the EMP threat to knock out the utilities of a potential adversary, and the satellite missiles that Russia and China have been developing very, very rapidly.
I'd like to go into the EMP threat, especially a little bit more detail, but we're coming to the end of our segment, and so let's take a break right now, and we'll come back after one more question. Are you kidding me?